Welcome to another episode of Africa's Big Switch. This episode, we sat together with Noelle, who is the Energy Insights Lead at Steers. Steers is a startup that focuses on providing data and insights to professionals interested in the African continent. And Noelle's previously worked in the Nigerian power sector as well, after studying a financial economics degree at the University of Kent. Noelle is passionate about improving energy access in Africa, and we really enjoyed speaking with her today. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello and welcome again to another episode of the Africa's Big Switch podcast. Today we have Sana and I, we have an interesting guest on the show. Her name is Noelle Okwedi. She is the Energy Insights Lead at Steers. Hi, Noelle. How are you doing?
Hi, Bolaji. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. We're halfway through the week, so it's almost the weekend. So I'm getting better as the week goes by. Nice. So Noelle, can you give us a few, give us an introduction. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about what you do at Steers and I guess what your day looks like.
Okay. So my name is Noelle Okwedi. I'm Energy Insights Lead at Steers. I produce energy insights from articles to data products and solutions. Steers is a B2B insights company, so we provide insights and data for professionals interested in the African continent. A bit about me, I studied economics. I'm an economist, and I used to work in the power sector before I moved to Steers, and I've been at Steers for over 2 years now. And at Steers, I worked on articles around oil and gas, electricity, renewables, and also data products like the energy price tracker and other solutions that we're coming up with. But yeah, that's a bit about me.
Really cool. And what do you mean by insights of curiosity?
So insights take many forms, but it's essentially information. It's just a fancy way of saying information, but information that people need to make decisions. So some insights, so the forms that insights take at Steers are articles, data products, data trackers, forecasts, and just anything that gives people information about the sector or the economy so they can make business decisions or investment decisions. Yeah, that's what we define insights as.
That's really cool. So tell us because you mentioned the power sector. You go into the power sector and now you work for Steers, and that started from studying economics at university. How and why did you get into the energy industry? So was there was it by accident or was it intended?
Yeah, it was an accident. So I had just moved back to Nigeria and I wasn't doing anything. I was waiting to go for youth service. So, and then my mom was like, "Oh, my friend works at a distribution company. It would be good for you to for you to work there, get some experience while you're waiting for NYSC." So I started at Port Harcourt Disco. And before I knew it, so I served there. And after serving, I was in the regulatory department and strategy department. And I joined at a time when the regulator, NERC, was just waking up, and they started adjusting tariffs and calling discos for meetings and started trying to resolve the gaps in the power sector. So it was a really interesting time. And for a young person, because I'm still young, but I was younger. But then it was just it was really interesting because I got to attend meetings at NERC and just follow the pace of the sector as everything was evolving and everything was just moving really fast. So yeah, that was how I got into energy. And then I moved to Steers, and there I expanded my scope from just the power sector, started covering oil and gas and renewables. So that meant upscaling on my information there, finding sources. I already had contacts in the power sector, luckily, so that was good. But just finding sources in the oil and gas sector, people I could talk to, people that could explain how the sector worked to me. Also, it also involved a lot of research. So yeah, and then that's how I got here today.
Okay, cool. So let's get into it then. I think your background is very apt for this topic. And for our listeners, we're going to be looking into fuel subsidy and the impact and the things that are going on in Nigeria in relating to the fuel price. So, first question is, can you like, I guess, paint the picture for us, Noelle? Can you give us a brief history of fuel subsidy in Nigeria? Like, what is even fuel subsidy?
Yeah, so in Nigeria's case, a fuel subsidy means that the government supplements the price of petrol. So the price that we used to pay for petrol, which was, I think, about at one point 97 naira, but more recently was about 200 naira before the removal, was less than the actual market price of petrol. That means the cost of petrol that's from the refineries or from the import cost or the landing cost of petrol was much higher than the price that Nigerians were actually paying. And the government was essentially covering that difference. And that meant that Nigerians got relatively cheap petrol and the government was bearing the full cost of the market price of petrol. Nigeria had a petrol subsidy from the 1970s. So I think in 1973, there was an oil price boom where oil prices increased really quickly because there was some dispute amongst the Gulf states. And so because of that, obviously, petrol is a byproduct of oil. So as oil prices increased, petrol prices increased suddenly, and the Nigerian government decided to give Nigerians cheaper petrol at the time, and just so that they would be protected from that sharp shock. But then at that time, actually, Nigeria was producing like 2.3 million barrels of oil per day. And obviously our population was less, so the government could afford it. But then for context, the last time we produced 2.3 million barrels per day was like 2005. So we haven't been there in a while. So fast forward to 2023, over 40 years later, and we still had the subsidy in place. But the problem was, actually, I don't know if I'm jumping the gun by talking about the issue now, but maybe I should stop there with the history.
So right now, can you give us a bit more context on why exactly are the fuel prices so high? And in the past, how the subsidies have really helped in improving the lives of Nigerians? It's kind of like a question, but yeah.
Sorry, can you take that again?
All right, and let me actually delve into one. But the first one being, why are fuel prices so high right now? Can you give us a bit more background on, should I say, the economics behind it?
Okay. So I think in May or late May, early June, when President Tinubu came in, he removed the petrol subsidy. So the subsidy I was talking about from the 1970s was just removed this year. And that meant that petrol prices in Lagos went from about 200 naira to about 500 naira. And this is the price that Nigerians should have been paying from years ago, at least from the past 2 years, because there's been oil price shocks in the past 2 years where oil prices have really increased. Last year, there was also limited refining capacity globally. I'll rewind a bit. After COVID, or during COVID, there was an oil price decline where oil prices were even negative at some point. And obviously countries weren't producing, it wasn't economically viable, and also there was lockdown, so there wasn't demand. But then after COVID in 2021, prices started increasing, but then refineries across the world had shut down production due to climate change concerns, poor maintenance, and also just COVID because there was low demand. So that meant that the cost of refined products went really high. So between 2021, 2022, and 2023, Nigeria's subsidy bill increased exponentially. In 2022, we paid about 4 billion naira or 4 trillion, actually 4 trillion naira on the subsidy. This year, just between January and June, the subsidy bill was about 3.5 trillion naira. So that just shows you like how much we're spending on this subsidy because prices had increased. And now Nigerians are actually supposed to be paying the actual market price that they should have been paying all along. So that's why prices are high. First, because refining costs are high globally, oil prices are high. Nigeria imports petrol. So that means that when the dollar shifts, our petrol prices also shift. Right now, with the exchange rate being, I think in the parallel market, it's over 1,000 naira. And at the I&E window, it's about 800 naira or so. That means that the petrol price has obviously also increased by a significant margin. So these are some of the factors that affect petrol prices in Nigeria and can explain why prices are so high right now. So just to recap, subsidy removal, oil prices, refining costs, exchange rates are why our prices are so high. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really good overview of it. I've actually learned in this few minutes that we started. I've already started learning so much. So just to follow up on that. So what would you say are the implications of this fuel subsidy on the government finances and the national budget? Like, why do they need to remove it? Wouldn't there be a budget for it? And if they carried on with the subsidy, what would the implication basically be?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, so like I said before, we've paid about 12, in the past 8 years, like during President Buhari's administration, we spent about 8 trillion naira on the petrol subsidy, which is significant. Actually, I think within the past 2 years, we spent more on the petrol subsidy than we spent on education, healthcare, and capital projects combined. So that means that we're spending more on a subsidy that doesn't even improve development than we're spending on our citizens, on healthcare, on education, these things that have impacts on development. And also, I don't know if you've actually asked me this question, but looking at the Nigerian budget in the past year, like our borrowing costs have been high, our revenues have been low because our oil production is low. So we've been borrowing a lot. Actually, I think in the last year, we spent about, for every naira that we earned, we spent an additional 1 naira on debt servicing costs. So that means that all our revenue was going towards debt servicing on interest payments. And so Nigeria actually has a revenue problem, but the revenue problem is also made worse by spending problem, where we're spending on a subsidy. We were spending on a subsidy that was improving development, while people were going poor, people were getting poorer, people are not educated, people don't have healthcare, but you're giving them cheap fuel. So it became a situation where the subsidy was actually it was a matter of survival. Like, do you want to develop your country? Do you want investors to come in? Do you want a more balanced budget, or do you want to give cheap petrol? And so that decision was necessary to make. It should have been made years ago, but it was delayed until now. And now Nigerians are reeling from high petrol costs.
That's quite interesting to hear. But in a wider context, because from what I've heard, because of this whole fuel subsidy issue, now a lot of people cannot really go into the office every day, or they have to cut down the number of days they get to work. So that means they are most likely going to be earning less. And then also maybe the impact of students going to school. So from your own opinion, how effective would you say the fuel subsidy would have been in the past in helping to improve the lives of Nigerians? Because right now, a lot of people think it's unfair. It's not right. We're paying so much. But then it's at one point, it was improving lives in a way. So are you able to expand more on that?
Yeah, so I think one statistic from the World Bank is Nigeria, the poorest of Nigerians weren't actually benefiting that much from the subsidy. And it was actually the richer Nigerians that were benefiting the most. So it was more of a regressive policy. So that's what the World Bank says on paper, which adds up because richer Nigerians are more likely to have cars, have generators, while the poorest of the poor Nigerians don't have all these things and probably don't buy petrol. But then the problem is that petrol is a significant contributor to the Nigerian economy in terms of logistics costs, because food is transported via cars and trucks, which run on petrol and diesel. So that means that if there's a spike in fuel, there's a spike in food prices, there's a spike in other commodity prices, there's a spike in prices of goods and services. And so it still ends up affecting even the poor Nigerians. So yeah, like removing the subsidy is definitely a decision that makes it harder for Nigerians. But that's why countries like Indonesia, when they removed their petrol subsidy, it came with a lot of communication. So there was time to educate people on why this decision was necessary, why it had to be removed, why the government couldn't afford it. And then on the other hand, there was also like palliatives given to people, social contributions and social benefits, just especially to the poorest of the poor in Indonesia, just so that there could be some cushion, especially in the short term, while the subsidy funds were diverted towards more towards development projects, like I said, like healthcare and education, because those projects, like, it takes a while before a hospital is built or a school is built. So in the short term, those palliatives actually make a difference.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. I think so. I kind of like the way you mentioned a few statistics, and I think the policy, the statistic you mentioned about the World Bank and about how fuel subsidy is more regressive, especially towards the poorest of the poor, is really, I guess, is insightful to me. And so my question is more, you started talking about it a little bit, and you mentioned about how countries like Indonesia were able to, I guess, successfully remove the fuel subsidy, and minimize the impact it has on the population. So the question from that is, how did Nigeria approach the fuel subsidy removal? And on top of that, I guess your thoughts towards the approach that was taken.
Yeah, so Nigeria's subsidy removal was abrupt. The president was sworn in May 28th, and during his speech, he said the fuel subsidy is removed. So at that time, nobody really knew what had happened. But then I think 2 days later, at NNPC stations, we started seeing higher prices. So in Lagos, for instance, the price of petrol used to be like 184 naira at NNPC stations. And then 2 days later, people woke up, went to petrol stations and saw 488 naira for a liter of petrol. So it was really jarring. But one thing I should mention about Indonesia was that past governments had tried to remove the subsidy, but they were met with protest. And the reason why the government that I mentioned was a bit successful was because they were popular. And I don't think that the Tinubu, especially at least amongst young people, the Tinubu administration wasn't a popular one. And so I think, not that I'm defending them, but to explain the logic for why it was so abrupt, it was possibly so that there wouldn't be protests, because waking up and just seeing new prices, there's no time to organize a protest because everything is already done and the prices have already changed. And even till now, Nigerians have kind of tried to adjust to the new reality. But I'll say that it was really abrupt, and I don't think that a lot of Nigerians understand the reason why it had to go. For Nigerians, the fuel subsidy was actually like I'd say the only benefit of being Nigerian in terms of perks that you get. Like, we don't have social benefits. It was just the subsidy, and now that's gone. So I don't know that a lot of Nigerians understand the rationale or why it had to go, or why that decision had to be made. So it would have been good for there to be more education, or even after the removal, if people were informed of, oh, this is why this decision is necessary, this is what's going to happen in the future. Because another thing is that removing the subsidy is one thing, but then it means that when prices change in the international markets, domestic prices also change. For instance, based on exchange rates, as of last week, petrol prices should be at 700 naira. And last month, we saw that the subsidy had partially come back because the government doesn't want to increase prices again. And that's the reality of a post-subsidy regime, right? As prices in the market change, domestic prices should be changing rapidly, actually daily, but you can say monthly if at worst. But now we've had prices at the same level since July, and it just shows that there wasn't a lot of preparation that went into this. It was quite abrupt on the side of the government and even for Nigerians, because now it's now like difficult to maintain the initial stance where the subsidy was removed.
Interesting, really, really interesting and good point. I remember that that comment, or should I say the speech from the president, and when he said it, and yeah, I could already predict that. Oh, as a president, saying something like that could impact the economy. But I like your second point as well about like the popularity and people welcoming the idea. I guess just like digging deeper as well. So this was something I didn't really understand as a kid, which I do now. But I guess for other people listening to this, understanding the impact of fuel subsidy to inflation and to the interest rates and to the exchange rate, because so some people might think about that it's fuel. So why is the price of food more expensive now? Like, how does that relate? Why is everything more expensive now? It's just fuel, and I should fair enough. I should pay more for fuel, but why am I paying like 3 times for everything else? Could you I guess maybe shed light or explain how the fuel subsidy to the common Nigerian, the fuel subsidy removal has made everything around them expensive?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in Nigeria, unfortunately, we don't have a functional train system for logistics. So everything in Nigeria is transported via road. Even petrol from Lagos to Zamfara is transported via trucks, but those are diesel-powered trucks. So essentially, first of all, we're talking about fuel in general. So when diesel prices rise, the price of fuel also rises. That's another component that can often be overlooked. So, and that's because, like I said, petrol is transported. So Lagos is where the ports are and where petrol cargoes land. From Lagos, then it goes around Nigeria. And so via diesel trucks. So if diesel prices go up, petrol prices are going up. But then that means that food prices are also going up because everything is transported via road. So food is put into trucks, transported from the north, from Benue State or wherever in the north to the south. So if petrol prices increase, diesel prices increase, those food prices are also going to go up. And that just means that as food prices are going up, also everything is going up, essentially, not just food. So even the cost of, what can I use now? Anything that is everything is transported via road.
Ashwebi,
I guess. So yeah, your tailor is sewing. He doesn't have lights, or she doesn't have lights, and she has to put on her generator at night to sew or to power her sewing machine. Everybody, she needs to get to her transportation costs are also higher. She needs to get to her shop to sew for you. Her transportation costs have doubled with the fuel price. So obviously she needs to make a living to cover her costs and also make a profit. So her prices are also going to go up, and then everything just keeps going up, and it's just like a vicious cycle that begins. And yeah, so that's how petrol prices affect everything, because transportation, electricity, logistics are all powered by fuel in Nigeria. So once fuel prices go up, everything goes up.
great answer. I don't think I could have explained it better, but my I guess my 12-year-old self will be proud if he knew like the response to this earlier. So I guess another question from me is, I know, so you mentioned how the full subsidy price, was it in 2023? I mean 2022 you said, or the entire Buhari administration was the amount paid for full subsidy was more than the amount budgeted for education, healthcare, and capital projects combined, which is huge, right? So now the question everyone's asking is, okay, cool. Now there's no longer full subsidy. We're no longer paying like hundreds of millions a year of dollars a year. So where is the money? So where's the money going to go to?
So I guess I should start with where the money came from for the subsidy. So like I said before, Nigeria has a revenue problem. The Nigerian government, they haven't been earning enough. They've been spending a lot on borrowing costs, servicing their debt. So there hasn't been, and also oil prices have been high, but Nigeria's oil production has been low. So since 2020, like pre-COVID, before March, we haven't produced up to 2 million barrels of oil per day. Last year, we were doing, for like a couple of months, between August and September, I think we were doing like less than 1 million barrels per day. I remember that oil is the Nigerian government's primary source of revenue. So when oil revenues are down, that means that the government revenue is down. They're not earning enough. So in that case, what happened was the NNPC, the National Oil Company, was actually paying the subsidy costs, not the federal government directly, because the government didn't have enough money to foot the bill. So there's actually no money from the government for this subsidy. Instead, they were even borrowing to support the NNPC, because the NNPC at some point was spending, I think in 2022, throughout 2022, the NNPC barely remitted any revenue to the federal government because they were paying for the subsidy. All their revenue was going to the subsidy. That's how expensive it was. And so now the NNPC is a private limited company. So they're now able to use their revenues for, so now they've even resumed remitting money to the federal government, to the government, but they're also able to use their revenues to develop for their own projects and other things that you have to do as a private company. And so essentially, the money for the subsidy that we keep talking about wasn't actually coming from the federal government. But the good thing is that now the NNPC is not bearing the cost of the subsidy, so they can pay money to the federal government. But the problem there is that they're actually not earning enough because we're not producing enough oil. So we're not earning as much as we were earning in, like, say, 2019 or 2018. Government revenue has actually declined. And that's probably why we're not seeing a material difference in, so when you ask where's the money isn't flowing as much as it used to, essentially.
That's very interesting. And now that we've had a look at where the money is coming from and what's happening with it now, how would you say the government can ensure transparency and accountability in ensuring that these funds are being properly managed, so that when maybe a few years down the line, we're hoping to see maybe the subsidy being brought back, or at least the money is going somewhere?
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants the subsidy to come back. Instead, what we should hope for is that the government is able to use the funds to develop the country, and so that people have higher disposable incomes and they can afford to buy fuel at the market price, because that's what we should have been doing all along, instead of subsidizing fuel. But I think in terms of transparency, so I'm not a governance analyst, but in terms of how the government can be more transparent with its funds, I think budget transparency is one big thing. So right now, the way the government spends money is very opaque. We don't really know what goes into what, especially in terms of capital projects. So everything is just lumped together. There are projects that we don't know if projects that money is allocated for are actually executed. So you might see in the budget, money for this road or this thing, but then you never know if it's actually been done. And then maybe years later, you see people on Twitter saying, look at this road, it's been like this for 10 years. And you're like, but it was in the budget. So things like that, being more transparent with what the funds in the budget are being used for, how the projects are being executed. Are they being executed? Are they done? Are they not done? I think that's the kind of transparency that Nigerians need, so that they can hold the government accountable when years from now, if God forbid, years from now, people still aren't able to afford fuel, or it's still a struggle as it is now, because the expectation is that in 5 years or 10 years, people should have higher disposable incomes. They should be able to afford fuel by themselves and not rely on the government.
Thank you for that. And then I loved how you spoke about Indonesia's example and things like that. But then I want to ask, in your opinion, what alternate, because first of all, before I even jump into that, this fuel subsidy situation really hit people hard. So what alternative strategies or policies could have been implemented, from your opinion, that could have addressed this issue much better in Nigeria?
So I think that one thing that could have been, or things that should have been done before now, first of all, Nigeria has terrible public transportation systems. So we don't have trains, we don't have good buses, we don't have a robust transportation network, essentially. So even if I don't want to drive my car, there's no other way for me to get around. I have to drive my car, when I could take a bus or take a train in a more developed country or a country with better transportation systems. That's something that should have been in place before now. But we're here now, so it's not too late. Government can still do it. But I think transportation systems is one thing that's really key. But then another thing that I've even seen like people begin to leverage is gas-powered vehicles, because gas is cheaper at market price. Like CNG for cars is cheaper than petrol, but that requires a lot of infrastructure. There are also issues in Nigeria's gas supply chain that need to be resolved by the government. And so there are lots of things that the government can do to provide alternatives for people. But the thing about it is that most of them are still in the hands of the government, as much as private sector players can try. There are lots of policy moves that need to be made to spur investments in these alternative sectors. So I think the first thing there would just be for the government to fix these issues, these policy issues, so that private investors can come in and invest and provide alternatives and make profits from that.
Amazing. And yes, it's quite sad because I mean, some of the things like you said could have been done. I guess all these things could have been done quite easily if you actually saved our money, rather than spend all of it. But fair enough. Like I think the CNG idea is actually really good, and I've seen it work. Even like here in the Middle East. But yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing the ideas. I completely agree with you. Apparently they've opened the Lagos Blue Line, and I think Red Line is coming on board. So, well, I guess we'll be watching closely to see how things unfold.
Yeah.
Now, kind of getting towards the end of the episode. I guess more of a personal note on a personal level. Thinking about, I guess, some of our listeners who might want to, I guess, be in the position that you're currently in, or kind of experience the kind of jobs you've done in the past, moving from the power sector to now, kind of just being in that energy insight space. What lessons do you have that you think would be helpful to share? And this could also be any, I guess, call to actions, or you could also share like job roles if people are interested in joining you guys upstairs, or any campaigns that you guys have. So in summary, what lessons have you learned that you think could be useful to our listeners?
I think one lesson has just been the importance of like working hard and being able to pivot, because like I said, I didn't study anything energy related. Actually, I studied financial economics and econometrics, so very far from energy. And I had no clue that I was even going to end up in energy. But just being able to pivot and being nimble, I guess, and flexible is very important. But also, I think there are a lot of opportunities in the energy space, and obviously Nigeria's energy space and Africa even at large is moving really quickly. There's a lot of room for improvement. So that means there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of need for young people to come in, people that are passionate, people that are hardworking, to just like take things to the next level. So I think that anyone that's interested in working in energy, as long as you're hardworking, you're also very willing to pivot, because like you've seen, things change really quickly in the energy sector. Tomorrow there's a subsidy. Today there's a subsidy, tomorrow there's no subsidy. Today there's one thing, tomorrow something has changed, and just being able to like move quickly with the times and adapt, I think is really key. In terms of steers, so like I said, we're also, another thing I should have added, besides the fact that we're B2B now, we're Pan-African. So we also recently started covering Kenya. And we've written like up to a bunch of Kenyan articles across macroeconomy, finance, and energy. So the Kenyan economy and East African economy is one that we're super interested in. And we're also hiring. So if you want to join Steers, you can just go on our website and see what roles are available. But yeah, happy for anyone to join Steers and join the energy sector. I think that we need as many people as we can get.
Amazing. I like what you said about the energy sector in Nigeria and in Africa is moving really fast. It's very dynamic. And that's why also ABS are trying our best to kind of getting you guys in touch with what's going on the continent. So last question that we always ask everyone. So I remember when I was chatting with you, Noelle, and you said that you're on holiday. So if you were an all expense paid trip, right? Where in Africa would you travel to and why?
All expense paid.
So this one is not staycation, it's like Pan-African, right? Where would you go to and why?
At this point, I'd like to go to somewhere with a beautiful beach. So just to unwind and de-stress. So I think Seychelles. I've already been, but like it would be nice to go again.
Thank you very much for doing this with us, Noelle. It's been extremely insightful. The insight lead at Steers, you provided us with insight today. No pun intended. but thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye bye.